Who are the characters behind science? This is Science Behind the Glass, illuminating the human side.
In this podcast, we unveil the human side of laboratories and science. Scientists share personal experiences and we discuss their meanings from different perspectives and fields of research.
Welcome back to Science Behind the Glass, illuminating the human side. In this episode, we delve into the inspiring journey of Lucy Graham, a passionate advocate for environmental sustainability and conservation. From her early days with organizations like the Wilderness Society to her pivotal role as the current director of CAFNEC, the Cairns and Far North Environment Centre, that is a no-government environmental organization. Lucy has dedicated herself to enhancing the capacity of local groups and community members to act for conservation. Lucy, thank you for being here and accepting this invitation.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
To start, Lucy, what leads you to work in an NGO and why is it important for you and for people?
Yeah, it's I probably came into the non-government environmental advocacy world in a different way to a lot of people, and there's lots of different pathways in, but I actually worked originally as an outdoor educator, taking kids out into the environment and helping them fall in love with nature and the world around us. But over time, I saw a lot of impacts to nature, a lot of changes, and I really just felt that I was helping kids to fall in love with something that wasn't guaranteed to be a part of their future. And that was really hard to sit with. And so, I went to university and I accidentally became an activist. And, if you start, I guess, looking around and taking action for the environment and starting to have a say about things that you can see happening around you that you don't agree with, you might just find yourself working for a non-government organization one day, because, that's really what small environmental and big environmental NGOs do.
Oh, fantastic. Explain us a little bit what CAFNEC does in the Far North Queensland, Australia.
Yeah, so the Cairns and Far North Environment Centre, affectionately known as CAFNEC, is a peak or regional organisation. So I always say, we're trying to be something to most people most of the time. As an organisation, we are an environment centre. So anyone in our region, which I always like to remind people is twice the size of Victoria. So although it's a regional community, it's a really big area. Anyone who sees something happening to the environment that they don't agree with, they can come and talk to us and we will help them advocate for that to, change. But we also run really important campaigns on really big issues like limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, trying to stop the big threats to our biodiversity like land clearing, trying to protect our reef and look after its water quality. We also do a lot of justice campaigns where the intersection of people and environment sit. We also have about 42 member groups from across the region, which are really important groups that are working on the ground to restore the environment, doing tree planting, cultural heritage care and natural heritage care, and we help them to meet their own goals as well.
Oh, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah, we do a lot.
Yes. And what is the importance of education to communicate environmental needs and requirements?
Yeah, I think understanding what's around you is a really important part of knowing why you need to look after it and how to look after it. And so education is a really important part of communicating the environment because if we don't understand what's happening when we look around, we don't know that it needs help. And education doesn't just mean in schools or in universities. It also means learning from First Nations people in the places that we live in. It means talking to the people around us. I really like the idea of local knowledge, First Nations knowledge and scientific knowledge are all really valuable parts of how we learn from each other. Because sometimes it'll be First Nations people who can teach you the most about, what's happening in the environment and what you need to know. Sometimes it'll be your fisherman who's been there for, multiple generations, or your farmers, all of those different parts of knowledge are important. But without really taking the time to understand what the environment should be doing or should look like, we don't know if it has a problem. And so I think the biggest example for me was when I was a kid, I used to look at, all of these dairy farms and be like, wow, look at all these beautiful fields. It's so amazing. And then after I learned a bit more, I was like, oh my God, so much cleared land and not vegetated stream banks and invasive species everywhere and impacts to soil. And so, and obviously there's lots of good things that can come from farming, but, we also have to look at how we're doing it.
Perfect. How do you see, or how can people be more empowered to demand their rights to a healthy environment?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question. And I think it's about knowing that you can. There are a lot of people who make a lot of money from not caring about the environment, large fossil fuel companies, corporations, multinational companies who are extracting from the environment in different ways and making huge profits off it. And one of the ways they succeed in doing that is by telling people that we're powerless, that we can't make a difference, that we're just one person, or by tricking us into thinking we're the problem and saying, oh, you just need to use less water or use less electricity or ride your bike, and all of those things are important. But actually it's, like a very small amount of people in the world who are driving the biggest environmental harm. And so I think the first step in people knowing that they can demand a healthy environment is knowing that you can, and knowing that there's lots of people around you who want to, and knowing that you can make a difference, and that it can be really enjoyable. Because I always say it's really hard to do something about environmental harm, but it's a lot harder to do nothing about it, because then you have to sit there and feel powerless. And so, I think the way that you can do that is by volunteering at organisations like the Cairns and Far North Environment Centre or our land care groups, where you can go and plant trees and learn about the environment that's around you, joining in citizen science projects, and then just asking questions. The first campaign I ever got involved in was when a large integrated casino resort development was proposed for a place at Yorkeys Knob. And I opened the newspaper and I was reading it, and I turned to my mum and I was like, who's going to do something about this? And she just looked at me and she was like, well, I've done my time. Now it's your turn. And it was a good thing if you see something like that and you ask that question, oh my God, who's going to do something about this? Often the answer can be you. You just have to find that organization or that group of people who are going to do it with you.
Yes, and then so that's important to mention that the NGOs that support, for example, people that are interested or empower these people that want to participate in activities or try to fight for the rights of having a healthy environment, for example.
Yeah, so you basically, we have a volunteering page on our website, and you can just sort of if you look at what we're doing and you feel excited about it, you can sign up, or you could just come to our centre in Cairns and say, hey, this is something I'm really worried about. Can you help me figure out how to do something about it? And we have training programs where we teach people about, how does advocacy work, and help people develop the skills and confidence to go and meet with your members of parliament or join a rally or, and I think there's also a really important thing for everyone to remember that change making looks different. And the news presents a lot of people going to protests and, doing big, brave things, speaking in front of lots of people. But sometimes there's lots of ways that you are helping behind the scenes in a way that might be more acceptable to an introvert or someone who gets a bit scared in large groups. And so that can be writing submissions on legislation or writing letters to the editor or, helping organize events. We have lots of events where we invite public discussion on big issues, and there's a lot of work that goes into that that's behind the scenes. So, protecting the environment can look like a lot of different things. And that's why, CAFNEC is so amazing, because it embraces everyone in the moment that you're at and helps you to, act on what your heart's telling you.
Perfect. That sounds exciting.
I really enjoy it.
and how NGOs can help to accomplish sustainable development goals and environmental, regional, national, and global commitments.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that we do so well for the world that is really not well understood, because what a lot of countries will do is sign up to commitments at an international level. And international commitments are really important because it is a place where globally we kind of compete to look at who's doing the best for the environment. But we also get pushed by other countries who feel the impacts of our decisions more than we do. And often developing countries will feel the impacts of climate change sooner than we will in developed countries in different ways. And so what we see is, in these international spaces, we see things like the Sustainable Development Goals, or, like Australia signed up to stop deforestation, or to put 30% of our landmass into protected areas by 2030. These really big goals. But without organizations like environmental NGOs, countries just sign up to those goals and then don't do anything about it, because in the international space, there really isn't anyone to hold them accountable to those commitments. And so, as far as like non-government organizations, particularly environmental ones, we really are the people who are watching our governments at an international, national, state, and local level and saying, either you've committed to this and we want to see how you're going to do it and we want to see the plan for it and you're going to have to do it, or we haven't seen you commit to these things. There's major environmental issues and you need to do something about it. And so, I think one of the naiveties you have as a young person is you look at our leaders in government and you think, okay, these are the people who are here to do the morally right thing. And the reality is that most politicians don't do the morally right thing, and the morally right thing is a very subjective idea as well, that changes from person to person. And so it's our job to ensure that at all levels of government, they are hearing a clear demand from across our society that, the environment has to be protected and these global, national and state commitments are not left to the wayside. And so we're kind of like a bit of a watchdog in some ways, you can't just sign up to things and then do nothing.
Yeah, so that's you advocate to like make the commitments, or the commitments become a reality.
Exactly. And quite often we have the experts who tell people how to do that. Because, to be a politician, they're the people who sign us up to these commitments. You don't have to have any expertise in those matters to be a politician. And so often, these people in positions of power really rely on us to understand, what are the challenges of delivering these goals. And as a regional conservation group, we have really important insights to that, because you can make a commitment over in an international meeting somewhere, but what does that mean, on the Atherton Tablelands or in Weipa or in Cape York? And what are the intersecting issues with other human issues like poverty and oppression and, all of the things that make it hard for people to look after the environment? So yes, it's a really interesting and very, like, in some ways quite complicated. But when it comes down to it, is like, if we don't have a large group of everyday people helping the governments who make these commitments understand that they're important and how to do them, it won't happen. And quite often it's lots and lots of people saying that the same thing in a really loud voice that even gets those commitments. Governments don't sign up to end land clearing unless a lot of people make a lot of noise about it, because you can make a lot of money off clearing land.
Yes, exactly. Well, in an immediate response, right? But also it's important to highlight that the NGOs, or especially CAFNEC, work with scientists to try to communicate what is happening. For example, what is the impact in ecosystem, and trying to translate, or works as a channel to communicate what is happening within in a particular ecosystem, what is affected, or monitoring changes, on mitigating impacts, and then tell also the politicians or the government, like, hey, they found this, and then communicate
Yes.
openly to what could be the possible solution.
Yeah, it's interesting, when I didn't go to university until I was 24 because I did TAFE and I really enjoyed being an outdoor educator. And when I did a Bachelor of Sustainability majoring in social science, and I got the privilege of studying in economics, in law, in ecology, in human rights and social sciences. And a lot of people, because I did quite well at uni, and a lot of people said, oh, you're going to do postgraduate research. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, there is so much incredible research that exists in the world that people don't know about, understand, and hasn't been implemented. And the science has been unequivocally highlighting the issues of biodiversity loss and climate change and regional environmental problems and water issues and problems with mining for an incredibly long time. But yeah, there's not as many people working to communicate that science and help people understand it. And as someone who, for many years wasn't a scientist, was an outdoor educator, I did find science hard to understand as an everyday person. And so after I did my undergraduate, I thought, no, I really want to be a part of helping this science reach the community, to be understood and to be used to communicate what's going on in the world. That's what NGOs do.
Yes, it's like the bridge, right? Between
exactly.
The bridge that brings science and community ideas and approach to the people and, for example, government.
And we couldn't do it without amazing scientists doing that work.
Yeah, but that's important, because I didn't think that, I don't know if many people knows that the connection with scientists and NGOs, or and also that you advocate through for the people and talking directly with the government to try to find solutions or try to mitigate the impacts.
And I think that's, in advocacy and activism, it's not a whole heap of people who are just yelling because they're angry.
Yes,
it's people who have understood the science and the traditional knowledge and the local knowledge and really understand that there is an urgent need to change things. But without that information and that sort of intellectual property that those different knowledge holders share with us, we won't be taken seriously by decision makers. And so you have to strike this balance of being powerful and loud and a strong community who people have to sit up and pay attention to, and also to be smart and informed and have the answers once they start listening. And that has to be done with every part of our community, from science to the everyday person who's signed a petition.
And now that we mentioned the scientists, what do you think that there's an interest from the industry and private sectors helping financially and supporting NGOs in different ways?
It's an interesting question. The answer is yes, there is. And I think there's a really positive side to that. And there's also a really dark side to it as well, because there are incredibly progressive businesses and industries who are supporting the work of environmental organizations and everyday people. And then there's also a lot of industries who are trying to make themselves look like they're not creating major environmental harm. And that has been a tactic of organizations for a long time, is saying, don't look over there where it looks a bit nasty. Look over here where we've got a grants program for, like these environmental causes. And so it's really interesting that there's private sector interest and industry interest in supporting non-government organizations. But yeah, we, like at CAFNEC, we have an ethical fundraising policy, which drives us to really consider who we're taking money from and why. Because we are a charity and we do take gifts, but we're not going to take them from everyone. And we always have to examine the interests of people as to why they might want to give. I think the really interesting part of this as well, and I'll just sort of name it, is like the growing development of the sort of carbon markets and biodiversity markets, where we're sort of monetizing reducing carbon or increasing biodiversity, which is, like neoliberal version of capitalism, where we're going to put profit and growth of our economy over most things, and that economy and monetary worth defines the worth of something is kind of the system that's driving a lot of environmental harm. And so using that system to value the environment can have perverse effects. But when that system is the main system we're working with, we also have to, kind of use that system to demonstrate the value of the environment, because it does. So that we're stuck in this really interesting time where we're starting to put monetary value to the environment, because we need to demonstrate in our economic system why it's important. But it is also the economic system that is driving a lot of environmental harm, because it is like profit over people, profit over the environment. So, I mean, I don't think that's really the question you asked. But I think it is a really important part to acknowledge in the complicated sort of financial setting that we're in.
And what industries do you think that maybe have an interest or have approached from your experience, have approached to you or to the CAFNEC organization, or that you are aware of other NGOs that maybe work hand by hand with other industries that try to do or improve or do the right thing?
I mean, to be totally honest with you, the majority of CAFNEC's funding comes from small donations from everyday people. It's really interesting, the power of our work is by people's voluntary time, and the power of our work is by small donations that many people make. I think as far as what are the industries that are most aligned with our sector is a complicated one to answer, because it's more business than industry. I would say that as far as the organizations that support regional conservation groups, it's local businesses who are we really support this. I'd say the main industry that supports us is tourism, because tourism so heavily relies on a functional environment, but it's usually non-financial support that that industry will provide to our sector around how we team up to advocate. I think that NGOs are very cautious about taking money from industry, because the industries that offer the most money are fossil fuel industries, and they're the most complicated. They're the ones you don't want to be taking it from: gas companies, oil companies. And so, and even it's interesting, you look at one of the biggest grant makers in Queensland is the Gambling Benefit Fund, which is just a whole heap of money that gambling companies have to pay to the community because of the cost that they imply on the social health of our communities. When you talk about it at an industry level, it's not such a big thing. But if you talk about at a business level, where there's small to medium enterprise businesses who are people who have set up businesses to serve their community because they really care about their community, they're the ones who give a couple of $1,000 donations or things like that, where they're I might be just a coffee shop, or a local accountancy, or it could be a law firm who cares about what happens in the environment around them.
And what do you think about some social political movements that promote anti-scientific and anti-environmental messages? How do you face this challenge from your work?
I think it's not simple, because in my core, and I don't think everyone believes this, but I think that the most important thing that we can ever have as a society is a society that can come together despite difference, and that a lot of skepticism, whether it's with science or other things, doesn't come from a place of being a bad person or being someone who hates science. Often it comes from misunderstanding or fear or the weaponization of corporate interests who have taken people's fear and turned it into something like skepticism or misinformation. And so, when you ask the question, how do you face those movements? I mean, I think sometimes it is we have to campaign against it, like one of the ways that can look is having misinformation watches. So that happens in social environment movements where we have like fact checkers, because there are a lot of corporate interests that will put out misinformation, slow down or distract people from the solutions that are really needed. But I think the most important thing that we can do is not divide ourselves, because if you look at social and environmental movements in history, the most effective way to stop them is to divide them. And so what we see at the moment is huge global corporate interests working very hard to polarize everyday people and say that you're alone or you're different, because that's the easiest way to stop us from creating a beautiful world that we want to live in. And so I always say to people, if you see someone who is different to you, or who has different views, or might not be sharing scientific or traditional knowledge well, try not to be angry at them, and don't try and convince them of your ideas. You need to come from a place of understanding, to ask curious questions, understand what that person's experience is and what's going on for them. Obviously, if they're being racist, discriminatory, and horrible, misogynistic people, we don't need to do that. I'm not saying go out there and expose yourself to harm, because sometimes it is super hard. But I think if you're talking to your friends or your family or people in your workplace, and they're saying things that you really don't agree with or you don't think are scientific, the worst thing that you can do is argue with them, because the science shows that only deepens people's ideas and differences, but it also polarizes our communities. So there's actually really good research, all about how this happens.
Yes.
And so as a scientist, if you're getting angry because people aren't listening to the science, you should go and read the science on how to deal with that, which says have an open heart, have an open mind, and be curious about that person, their experience, and find a way to connect with them on mutual value, because that's what makes a better world, is people trying to connect with each other through kindness.
To listen instead of like answering or preparing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or having a fact. Often people come to CAFNEC and they're like, can you please tell me all the facts that I need to know to convince someone that this is the right thing to know? And, often I'll say, no, but you can come into our community, connect with a bunch of people, and learn how to connect with lots of different parts of the community and create a brighter world together, which I think it's a more fun way of doing it as well, and less arguey.
And what has been, I guess, that you have many challenges. What has been one of the biggest challenges that you have faced, and how you overcome it or how you deal with that?
I think the biggest challenge is to keep facing the challenges. My mum said to me, I love my mum. She's a big mentor for me. And she said to me once when I was young, leadership isn't stepping up. It's standing still while everyone else runs away. And I think she's pretty spot on with that, because, when you choose to do something like, environmental advocacy, it's your job to agitate people, right? It's your job to agitate everyday people into thinking differently. It's your job to agitate, governments into doing things differently. And so, like I always say, if everyone's a little bit happy and a little bit pissed off with me at the same time, then we're probably doing a good job. But it does take a toll, and turning up every day to sit with and explore and try and make change on some of the biggest environmental harms and the really big problems in the world it's tough emotionally and mentally. And I'm really pleased to see that in our movements and in our society, there's a lot more mental health support and well-being support for people who are change makers, because I think we have to nurture our hearts as we face these big problems. So I'd say the biggest challenge is continuing to do the work when it can feel really difficult. And the way I've done that is by focusing on that connection with other people who are choosing to turn up, and a really good therapist.
And finally, we want to hear about an adventure that you have with your best friend Matilde Gordon in 2018 when both of you kayak about 2,000 kilometers from Juneau,
Yeah.
Alaska to Vancouver Island, Canada. 3 months kayaking expedition, and in which both raise awareness of marine plastic pollution and promote women in adventure. Can you share more about this exciting adventure with us?
Yeah.
And why did you decide to do that?
So funny, so many people ask why. My brain is always like, why not? What a great time. But really the answer is like when I was 19, I traveled to Canada and I caught a ferry across Vancouver Island, and I was kayak guiding back home in Australia at the time, and I saw these islands and I was like, wow, this looks like an incredible place to kayak. And when I got home, I did some research and I was like, oh, well, people have kayaked that whole, like island series. I guess I could do that one day. And, I think that's the beauty of what my parents instilled in me from a young age is look at the world and just say, yeah, I can do that, even if you haven't really done anything like it before. But, it's also, that was a really a big thing to take on. So, even though I first thought of it when I was 19, it was many years later that I looked at a friend I had made and thought, she'd probably be up for that. And when I asked her, she was like, she's never kayaked more than a day in her life. She's only done day trips before. And I'm like, you want to do this trip with me? And she said, do you think I can do it? I was like, yeah, if we train and do the planning. And she was like, will there be heaps of cool animals? And I was like, oh yeah, man, there's so much cool stuff there. And she was like, okay, let's do it. And it was simple as that. And I always say, I don't know who was more crazy, me, who had more idea of what we were in for, or you, who had no idea and still said yes.
Are you getting into?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it was 2,042 kilometers and 89 days paddling on the ocean in between these incredible islands that exist on the west coast of Alaska and Canada. And yeah, we recognize that you have a place of privilege if you can take 3 months off in your life to go and do a kayaking trip. And so we wanted to make sure that we also use that to communicate. People love a good adventure, love a good story, and we knew that we could use it to have an impact. And yeah, so we raised $20,000 for ocean conservation organizations. And we did it without using single-use plastic. And that was a really interesting, challenge, because all of the food you take with you on those trips is usually cryovac-in. Yeah, so yeah, we wrapped it up in newspaper. We made a film about it in the end. We just took a GoPro with us and we were just held filming each other, and some amazing artists put it into a film that toured with the Ocean Film Festival and a number of other festivals. And it's on YouTube now. You can watch it. It's
yes, I'm going to share the link.
Oh, great. Yeah.
In the references, in the way they had the chance.
Yeah. But I think, my highlight was just, in everyday life, you have so many things you have to do, get up, have breakfast, do this, do that, go and do a podcast recording, go and do some, go to work, whatever it is.
Rushing.
And sure, it's challenging. You have to paddle in the rain and the wind and sleep in a tent, but all you actually have to do is get from A to B every day. That's it. It's so simple. It's so beautiful, and it's incredibly peaceful, and you don't have any phone reception. So, no one can contact you. You're not distracted by all of the things that society has done to sort of overstimulate us. It's incredibly relaxing, even if it is hard physical work.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You're so brave.
Yeah.
But as you said the other day that we were having the conversation, we are brave in different ways. Right.
Yeah, I think there's there's a couple of things, like the absence of fear is not bravery. Bravery is when you're really scared of something, and so being brave looks really different for lots of different people, depending on your personal experience of life.
Yeah.
For example, for me, getting up and talking in front of an audience of people now is incredibly easy. I don't even think about it. But for another person, that could be the most terrifying thing that they've done. Am I brave? No, because I'm not scared of that thing. But is the person who's really scared of it standing up and doing it brave? Yes. And so I'm not saying I wasn't scared at different parts of that trip. And I definitely was like, when we were launching, I was like, wow, the audacity of myself to think that I can do this. But, I think being brave is what gives life meaning. If you're not brave, then you never got to learn anything new or grow as a person. Bravery is the essential ingredient to being, having new experiences, growing as a person, and expanding that world you have.
Yeah, that's true. It's like the spice of life.
It is.
And Lucy, thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge, for explaining in simple words, for accepting the invitation. There's a message that you like to share with the audience from Latin America, from different parts of the world.
One day I hope I could do this whole interview in Spanish as well. But I think just, and also, I traveled in Latin America for a year, and it's one of the most incredible and most beautiful environments in the world. There's still pieces of my heart there. But I think the thing I would say is that the most important thing that everyone can do is find a way that looking after the environment can work for you in your everyday life, because we don't need everyone to be doing the biggest things for the environment. We need everyone finding a way to express their love and care for the environment in a way that is possible for them in their life in that moment, because we all have different experiences, but we can all find a way to love nature, because it is inherently what we depend on for life.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you.
The role of this organization is not limited to a particular branch of action. Instead, it serves as a link between different communities' problems or environmental issues that are ignored or neglected by governmental institutions. So, it is crucial to keep this independent work as a counterweight to companies or governmental projects that can potentially impact the community.
These organizations also play a part in education. We talk about this part of society that thinks that science is a way of controlling their life, or this kind of vision that portrays scientific endeavors as something deceitful. Many NGOs make an effort to communicate the urgency of their fights and how science-based decisions are more beneficial in the long run for most citizens.
That's right. NGOs play a crucial role in advocating for various causes. But these organizations also have to overcome many challenges. Getting funded is one of the most common challenges because they heavily depend on donations, grants, and funding from governments or private entities. This dependence can lead to financial instability and can sometimes influence the NGO's agenda. In this case, Lucy was clear that NGOs need to be quite critical about who is giving donations and for what purposes.
That's right. A delicate matter about NGOs is the control mechanisms that may vary from country to country. This kind of organization should function like a company, meaning that the structure is needed to maintain precise counts and accountability to donors and the general public. In some cases, when these conditions are not met, it can be promising to corruption scenarios. While NGOs advocate for accountability from others, they can sometimes fall short in this area. Lack of transparency in their operations and finances can undermine their credibility and effectiveness.
Despite facing many challenges, NGOs play a crucial role in empowering communities to advocate for their rights. Without NGOs, communities might struggle to demand a pollution-free environment, for example, protect endangered animals, and address other critical issues. These organizations are vital because they act as independent intermediaries, bridging the gap between industries, government, and communities, ensuring that voices are heard and actions are taken. I think it is pivotal that NGOs are better understood and known by everyone because sometimes they are the last resort for communities in need.
Thank you for joining us today in this episode. This episode was inspired by the article Environmental Non-Governmental Organizations and Global Environmental Discourse. We have included references to this material and our guest information in the episode description. Remember that this podcast is self-funded. and self-edited by Kids Host. You can support us by sharing and subscribing, listening our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and our official website. Follow us on social media on X, Facebook, and Instagram. Original music by our colleague and friend Bernardo Aguila, and the technical support from our promotions manager and friend Rafael Jordan.